are back with another edition of Newsmakers. It's me, Paul Joseph Watson. We've had many big guests over the past few weeks, and I'm delighted to be joined by another one. He needs no introduction whatsoever. He is Alex Jones. Alex, welcome.
Paul, we've been working together almost 19 years, and I've encouraged you to not just do the very popular videos that you break down different issues in, but to actually do interviews. And I've been loving your interviews, been loving your style. It's the opposite of mine. Very smooth, very professional. So it's great to be here with you on your show.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Now, obviously, I'm going to get into the Capitol building siege, breach, storming, whatever they're calling it right now in a moment. But first, main reason I got you on is because I saw you went viral on Twitter this week. And actually, imagine my shock, received praise from some of your detractors because you went after believers in QAnon, of course, advocates of whom, some of whom at least, stormed the Capitol last week. What kind of damage has this group caused to the Trump movement, to the MAGA movement in general? And what infuriates you so much about their claims?
Well, pulling back from what happened at the Capitol for a moment, and I do want to be able to spend some time to break that down, the media, a lot of newspapers, a lot of publications, and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube picked up some smaller edited clips where I was yelling at the Q shaman guy with the bison buffalo horns on with all the Thor paint on him and all the tattoos. And they were saying, oh, Jones finally is against Q. Jones is finally turning against all this lunacy. Since Q popped up 3 years ago, I've not liked it. I've tried to be friendly to listeners that got into it. I've tried to explain to them that you don't want to go off esoteric as one goes. We all go, and breadcrumbs and the white rabbit, when global government's out in the open. The New World Order's out in the open. This stuff's all in the open. So why make it esoteric and kind of be like a Gnostic religion? But then once I saw it becoming clear that Trump would not get back in the Oval Office in the last few months, the Q people got more vitriolic and said, no, he's invincible. But now that it appears that, again, he will not be the president for the next 4 years on January 20th next week, they're now saying, oh, we don't really need Trump. He was just part of the larger plan. So they are the most discredited group out there. It's connected to these globalist PR firms we know that are there to discredit legitimate questioning and legitimate research. And so I'm not mad at Q followers. I'm not saying some good hasn't come out of research they've done, but the Q droppings have less value than horse manure.
Again, as he said, it's always a dead-end conspiracy. There's always the same claims they make. The mass arrests are about to happen and all this kind of stuff. And nothing ever comes of it. And it gives people false hope. And it makes people believe in complete disinformation, which goes absolutely nowhere, as he said. But let's get into it. You were at the rally in D.C. last week. From what I saw of you on video, you were there telling people not to breach the Capitol, not to get involved and to provoke police officers. Of course, Trump's now being impeached for inciting an insurrection. We'll get onto that. But what did you witness on the ground before and during this chaos that unfolded last week?
Well, I want to be clear. Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and all the rest of them, they're not going to say when they were wrong. When they say go out and attack people, when they say people do what people do when they're burning down buildings or tearing down statues or shooting people. I mean, we've seen thousands of times the violence from Antifa and BLM and leftist mobs, not just in the U.S., but all over Europe, all over the U.K., as you know, Paul. And when that happens, the left encourages it. When Congressman Scalise got shot, CNN said, well, the guy that killed him isn't a terrorist, he's a hero. They had a guest on saying that, and Wolf Blitzer nodded his head in agreement. When Rand Paul got his 6 ribs broken and his lung punctured, the media celebrated that. So we've seen this. When I've had people dump coffee on me or try to hit me, the left celebrates it. So I've always been against offensive violence. I believe what Obi-Wan Kenobi said, the Star Wars character, that you use the force for defense, never for attack. And I'm a big follower of Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, and, of course, Jesus Christ. And so I may have heated rhetoric sometimes about we're going to fight for our country and we're in an info war, but that's fighting with the truth. That's fighting with information. But that said, I would have done things way differently if I had hindsight and I would have had 50 security people down there. I would have been down at the Capitol before anybody got there, before Trump even gave his speech, so that that small minority of Antifa and, yes, some so-called patriots, mainly Q people, would not have broken through the meager defenses and then gone in and had that photo op. Most people walked within the velvet robes. Most people simply were there LARPing, getting photos of themselves with selfies with the statues and things. But there were 30 or 40 fights that broke out. There was an officer crushed in the doors. An officer did have a heart attack from the stress later. And 4 citizens, including Mrs. Babbitt, were killed. And so compared to Kenosha or compared to Seattle, this was much smaller in the number of people that were actually hurt. But there's the iconic Capitol and what happened. So I really had a blind spot because I've been to so many Trump rallies that are so peaceful. We'd already had 2 giant rallies in D.C. and marched to the Supreme Court and marched to the Capitol. There were already hundreds of thousands there the day before marching around the city. Trump supporters, by and large, are some of the most peaceful groups out there. It's kind of like the cliche that Canadians are really nice. Well, they really are nice when you meet a real Canadian, somebody that's actually born there. And so I'm there while Trump's giving his speech. And the leftist media has spun this to say Jones admits he paid for the riot. No, Trump had said he wanted a January 6th rally. He had telegraphed that through people in the campaign in the White House to us. I'd confirmed it. And then nobody was stepping up to pay for the initial funding of stages for the venues. I put down over $100,000. Then the White House got involved and wanted it to be at the Ellipse. That was going to take an additional $300,000, $400,000. A donor stepped up. I handed it over, and the donor to the folks involved with the White House in fundraising. And so I'm not denying that I helped organize this because the president wanted to have a peaceful rally, and he himself said that in the speech. They just edited that out, and so did Don Jr. Don Jr. said, we're not going to be violent today at the Capitol. We're not like Antifa and BLM. We don't burn down things and shoot people. So, again, they can sit there and edit out what we said and make it sound like we wanted to do this. This discredited Trump. This hurt me really bad. I wish this never would have happened. But in hindsight, if I'd have been psychic, I would have gotten there before anybody got to the Capitol. But there I am about a mile away from the Capitol at the Ellipse, right there by the Washington Monument, in between the Washington Monument and the White House. And, this is like a 5-hour event. I'm freezing my butt off. My wife wants to go back to the hotel. Her toes are frozen. Finally, Trump comes out. And they had told me 3 days before, the lady that we knew was coordinating with the White House. She said, yeah, no, Trump wants you to lead the demonstration, make sure it's peaceful. She wants you to leave 20, 30 minutes before he's done and go out Pennsylvania Avenue that was right there off the Ellipse and lead them. And I said, I can't lead what looks like 1 million people. It's just giant seas of people as far as you can see all around us. I'm sitting there, in the front row. I could see the whole thing surrounded by people just as far as you could look everywhere, up the hills, up the roads, on the Washington Monument. She said, well, nevertheless, just make sure you try to keep them peaceful. So sure enough, 20 minutes towards the end of the speech, Secret Service comes, opens up the gates right off to the corner where Trump's speaking. Trump's right here speaking 30 feet away. Giuliani's right here. They open the gates. Secret Service leads us through. We go to the back. They open up the back gate. There's all these armed police there, Secret Service, but in uniform. And they're all smiling at me and saying, hi, Alex. And I go, okay, I'm supposed to do this. And then I stand there because there's already giant crowds going down the road towards the White House as far as I can see from the White House Ellipse to the Capitol. And I look down side roads and there's giant numbers of people. And I said to my crew, I said, we got to get down there now. They're already there. And we had a debate about that. Some of the crew were like, no, let's stay here and wait till Trump comes out. And I said, listen, I got a bad feeling. We got to get down there. We got to make sure stuff doesn't get out of control. And then I get up on one of the big embankments with one of the big planters that are about 10 feet off the ground there at Freedom Plaza, and I tell folks, let's be peaceful, let's start marching. So I try to get a big group together with me, and then we start marching down, and then the text message comes in. People are fighting with Capitol Police. We see the riot police footage on our phones as we're walking. We start walking faster. We get there, and it looks like 300, 400,000 people are there. It was just gigantic seas of people all around the Capitol. You see flashbangs going off, smoke. I'm 300 yards, 250 yards from the front of the Capitol and where they had the scaffolding being set up for I guess, Biden's inauguration or Trump's or whoever it was going to be. Biden says this is virtual, so I don't know why they're building it. And I said, man, that's kind of cool. That's where Biden's supposed to get inaugurated, but the people have taken it over, you know, compared to burning down buildings and shooting police. It's a form of civil disobedience, but I didn't really support it. So I'm saying, hey, folks, get off there, come off that. But they can't hear me because I'm hundreds of yards back and the crowd is so solid. So then I climbed up on a big pallet of chairs that were folded, that were plastic wrapped, that hadn't been unpacked yet. And I bullhorn, turn back. We're not Antifa. We're not BLM. This is going to really look bad. We could have a Kent State. People could get shot and killed here. And little did I know that already a couple hundred people had gone in. Then the police, we later learned, opened the gates, let people in. Those are the folks that thought they were just coming in for a tour because they were 200, 300, 400 yards back, did not know what was happening inside, because this is all happening live. And no one had been killed yet. So I go to the Capitol Police. We've released all this video at man.video. And I tell them, I say, I know there's a PA system here. You hear them announcing on it now, really loud, all around the Capitol at night. At 6 o'clock, you better go. You'll be arrested. I said, I know you got a PA system. I said, I'm surprised there's so few of you here. I told my people, I said, this looks like a stand down. And I said, you need to let me get on the PA system and tell people to get out of the Capitol right now before folks get hurt. I said, I'll tell them I'm Alex Jones. They'll recognize my voice. Most of these people, 80% of them are my listeners. I can de-escalate this now. And they go, let us get you a commander. So that took 10 minutes. By then, folks weren't really going to the Capitol. They figured out this was bad. The news was coming out. It was bad. Because again, 99% of people are outside. And then, Paul, I really appreciate being able to tell the story of actually what happened. You get all the video. This is man.video. And you're welcome to play any of these clips as I see you're doing on the show. But the police say, well, you can just go up there and use your bullhorn and try to get them out. And I said, well, I'm not going to the building. Do I have permission to go up top there? They said, yes, you have permission to go up there and use your voice, try to stop this. So I get up there and I say, hey, let's come down off of this. And about 90% of people that can hear me go, yeah, we agree. But about 10% are like, oh, you're a wimp, Jones. We're taking the country back. So I'm being honest. It wasn't all just Antifa. It was, you know, a percentage of folks, you know, are pissed and wanted this and weren't being sophisticated in what they did. And so I say, okay, you're not coming with me. I'm leaving. So about a couple thousand folks start following me. As soon as I get off the steps, the police throw more flashbangs out trying to get people off of the steps. So they gave me a chance. They wouldn't come down. More flashbangs. And then I'm walking and I hear a woman's been shot. So then I turn around and I start bullhorning the crowds. I say, I'm leaving. This is a setup. We've walked into a trap. And this is not what this was about. This was about being here really prayerfully, trying to get people to think about the American people and our numbers, showing that Biden can't fill a high school gymnasium with people, but Trump can get 1 million people to D.C. This is not who we are. I'm leaving. And by the time I'm walking off the Capitol grounds, there are dozens and later hundreds of vehicles pulling up, guys getting out with their assault rifles, running in towards the Capitol. And then it didn't matter if you were a woman, didn't matter if you were a person with your kids. Then they would point guns at you and scream at you and arrest you. And then, oh, we caught all these terrorists in this big net. When really what happened was, take the city of Austin, 2 million people. If they focused in every night on the couple murders that happened or a couple of rapes that happened and only showed you that or showed you the few bar fights that happened, you would think Austin was this incredibly dangerous, evil place. But the truth was, Antifa, known Antifa members did help initiate, before Trump even spoke, fights with Capitol Police to get riot police out there. But there were also boogaloo types, accelerationists, that were right-wing groups that did come planning to trigger a civil war. They were promoted through the QAnon boards. That's just a fact. And so it was a collection of Antifa leaders saying they were coming to dress as Proud Boys and Patriots to start a fight. It was then a collection of boogaloo type accelerationist right-wingers that want to get a civil war going. And then some very professional, undercover-looking paramilitary that were probably FBI hostage rescue team that were there just to oversee in case things got too out of control, because the Q simulators that are in augmented reality being programmed by the game technology that is Q, they went with zip ties, a lot of them veterans who believe they were under President Trump's command to arrest Pelosi and Schumer. Well, the globalists already knew this was about to happen, so they pulled their people back. They put them in the basement, and then they had HRT, which is former Special Forces people, all dressed the same so you could recognize them to each other, but without insignias inside in case the Q-tards and others actually did something and actually took somebody hostage. So they were there to make sure the LARPing and the simulation didn't get too extreme. And so that's really what happened. And I mean, I'll just say it. I'm very proud of my 27 years on air, and I'm a man in the arena, Paul, and I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I've always, tried to fix those mistakes. And I'm proud of the demonstrations we had a few months ago. I'm proud of all the peaceful events, hundreds of them we've had around the country. I'm proud of the Trump rallies that have been almost completely peaceful, not like mostly peaceful, and, it's buildings burning down like CNN says in Kenosha. But I am extremely upset with myself that I didn't think about the fact that they could have the Capitol Police stand down or that Antifa would be that successful, because we're always hearing that, we're going to be violent every time. I saw that in the newspapers and just rolled my eyes, when the truth is America is pissed. There is boiling water. We are a pressure cooker. And so my rhetoric has never been directed towards physical action, but I can see how out of context, when the media edits it, it could actually be used to rally folks that are very, very angry. And there are some folks, both on the left and right, that are a few cards short of a full deck. And so I've got to really watch what I say so that I'm not taken out of context. And so my rhetoric isn't used to really lead this country into a civil war, which the globalists and the Chi-Coms want to really destabilize things. That's what the COVID lockdown's about. That's what the Great Reset is. And they want this to fully change our way of life into an authoritarian system and to legitimize the surveillance grid and the police state. And now they want to use what happened at the Capitol to act like any demonstration is some type of terrorist action. And I appreciate you letting me rant here, but they wouldn't let, and this is very important, Trump call up the National Guard for Antifa and BLM the last 10 months. But as soon as people do something similar on a much smaller scale, but still a very iconic place, so I get why it's a big deal, then, 20,000 troops and all this, total overkill. This is martial law, and it's everything we've been fighting all these years, my friends. So this is a dark moment for America and the world, and so I want to be a very strong voice, and I appreciate you having me on to call for total de-escalation and to not have violence in the 50 capitals this weekend, as the accelerationist boogaloos and others are saying they're planning to do. That is not the answer, and it's not what we want. We want a cultural revolution of ideas, not a physical revolution, randomly attacking capitals and governor's mansions. Again, many of those led by leftist groups in control of QAnon rhetoric to then program people who believe they're under the secret command of Trump. This is incredible.
Yeah, you mentioned it there, Alex. And this is what Trump said during his speech. This is what, they cut out or they don't focus on. He said, quote, he called on the assembled who were at his speech to, quote, march over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. The key word there being peacefully. While he was saying this, Alex, the group that subsequently stormed the building had already gathered at the Capitol building, which is a 45-minute walk away. So Trump had not even finished his speech, not even said he wanted people to march peacefully to the Capitol building. They were already there. We've seen the videos. And now, by the way, over the past 24 hours, even the mainstream media is admitting that this wasn't a spontaneous event. It was pre-planned in advance. You had the footage of the Capitol Hill police officers waving people in, opening the barriers. Do you think they did that because they were trying to create a kind of steam valve? They were trying to facilitate LARPing because they didn't think it would go any further. And then it got out of hand as a result of the people who had pre-planned it. How do we explain
that? Is exactly, you are so good at crystallizing what would take me 20 minutes to say in 30 seconds. Say that again. What you just said is exactly what happened.
Yeah, the footage that we just showed was Capitol Hill police officers not only opening the barriers, but waving people in. I'm asking the question, were they unwittingly facilitating those LARPers in knowing the nature of Trump supporters generally being very peaceful compared to BLM and Antifa? thinking that if they just facilitated them getting up onto that scaffolding area, letting them let off some steam, have a little celebration, then thinking it wouldn't go any further, that's why they probably let them in through the barriers, let them get closer. Meanwhile, the people who had pre-planned it, which the media is now admitting, had planned all along to breach, to violate, to enter the building. Is that what we saw in the footage of Trump supporters being allowed closer to the Capitol building?
Yes, Paul. And, I have information that I've been researching to verify that it's completely accurate that I'm going to be releasing very, very soon about some of the identities of the people other than Antifa, because there was top Antifa, famous Antifa that's been arrested and charged with triggering riots that was there, that were amongst the first to go in. But there was also organized paramilitary types that were wearing orange caps that also helped back up Antifa and finally break through the riot police. And the riot police, because they were outnumbered, then made the decision, and I guess the deputy chief did, to go ahead and open the doors up like they do for BLM or Antifa around the country and to try to de-escalate. But again, we put this footage out days after it happened. It shows the window knocked out and men handing all these clubs through. And again, men with radios in their ears, earpieces, all of this. So absolutely. The Q people, again, were the ones LARPing and taking photos of themselves and sitting in Pelosi's desk and running around with zip ties because they believed they were there to arrest Pelosi at Trump's behest. So that's why this LARPing technology is so dangerous, is these people literally believe they're secret agents that are getting a secret agent message. And that's something intelligence agencies have done for hundreds of years. It goes back to secret societies thousands of years ago, because they would tell people, oh, you want to join the cult of Mithra, or you want to join the cult of Saturn, or the cult of this or that? You've got to go out and do things for the cult, and then we'll allow you into the secret society. But a lot of times it wasn't even that secret society that was manipulating somebody. It would be a group posing as the secret society. But because the secret society was so powerful, people would do anything to get into it. So that's this fetishing of intelligence agencies. And when McInerney, the general, says, ooh, Army intelligence, everything's fine, Trump's invincible, this is really the cult of that. And so they got grown men, Air Force and Army veterans, to come with zip ties to try to go into the Capitol Rotunda and go into the House and Senate chambers as if there would be waiting for them the members so they could arrest them. Of course, there were armed men waiting in the basement to kill them if they tried that. And there were also hostage rescue team of the FBI. I've looked at the cut of the guys, their faces, how they're all wearing the same unofficial uniforms. The masks are all worn exactly the same. I know the look of actual special forces. And they were there, not because they were with Q. And the General McInerney's like, that was Q troops to get Pelosi's laptop. And they used the storming of the Capitol as the cover to get it. Really? No. They have wireless systems where they can break into any laptop they want and download all the damn contents. They didn't do all this fiasco to get a damn laptop. And even if this was the truth, which it isn't, sorry, I'm ranting. I try to be calm. Even if that was the case, Paul, the FBI is going to do nothing with it. So it's all just made up, delusional crazyism. And this Q thing has infected everything. And that's what drives me so crazy it's like this fantasy land. And so I didn't realize how powerful it was. So again, Antifa was the very tip that started the fights in the morning before Trump even spoke. They weren't able to get much done because the Patriots beat them up and grabbed them. We have dozens of videos of that. And so then a bunch of big guys in orange hats, and there's a whole other group all wearing their own uniforms of camouflage. They all attacked, broke the police line. And then some of the idiots in the crowd went, Q, it's Q. It's special forces are with us. And then they all ran in there for the setup.
Yeah, and I mean, we have the names of the BLM Antifa activists that were at previous BLM protests, multiple protests. The guy who literally filmed Babbitt being shot in the neck was a BLM Antifa agitator, criminal record, who had been at multiple previous left-wing protests. His name is John Earl Sullivan. He's been named in the media. We have another one today, a Democrat, a 34-year-old son of a New York judge, registered Democrat, was at the protest. That's not to say that the vast majority were not QAnon-type Trump supporters. We know they were, but we also know that when the media claims There was no Antifa or BLM whatsoever. That's a provable lie because John Earl Sullivan was right at the front filming Babbitt being shot. I'm going to move on, though, to the consequences of this now, Alex. You mentioned earlier James T. Hodgkinson, who, of course, in 2017 tried to massacre a group of Republican congressmen during a baseball practice game. He was incited by the rhetoric of the mainstream media about Russian election interference. We know that now in the aftermath of that attack. Bernie Sanders, who he supported, came out immediately and condemned it. And even Trump came out immediately and said, we shouldn't politicize this, we should move on. And most people moved on very quickly. There was no legislative response to this. Compare that to what happened in the aftermath of the Capitol Hill breach last week, Alex. We've got talk of a new Patriot Act. Chuck Schumer's comparing it to Pearl Harbor. 2,400 dead Americans during Pearl Harbor. That is demented to compare it to that. I'm just going to put that out there, whatever you think of what happened. Others have compared it to 9/11, the rise of Hitler. Meghan McCain says Trump supporters involved should be sent to Gitmo camps. We've seen calls for Trump supporters to be treated like domestic terrorists, to be put on no-fly lists, arrested, their children to be seized and put in re-education camps. That from a PBS employee.
Head lawyer at PBS.
James O'Keefe. Yeah. So the question, Alex, given all this frothing overreaction, I would say, to a lamentable, tragic event for the people that died, and an event that we should condemn, but an event that should not be compared to literal mass casualty terror attacks like 9/11 or the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Yes, this isn't 500 Japanese planes with torpedoes and bombs blowing up more than 20 battleships.
Yeah, and it's demented to claim it is. The question is, how can there be healing in America when, given all this, putting Trump supporters on no-fly lists, domestic terrorist legislation, how can there be healing in America when many on the left want tens of millions of Americans literally removed from society?
Well, that's what this is about. Let all the rapists and robbers out of the jails and then put COVID skeptics in them, forced inoculations, world government, the Great Reset. This is the whole dystopic rollout because we have populism in Europe, in the U.S., in South America, exploding. And so Klaus Schwab and others, you've written articles about it, you've done videos on it, admit we're going to use the COVID lockdown to punish populists and to bring in a surveillance state. So this is the rollout, taking Trump's bank accounts, putting people on no-fly lists just because they were Trump supporters in D.C. for the event. This is the message to everybody that you don't have any types of free speech and that you should just accept these type of dystopias. And so that's really the big news I've got for people, Paul. I want to be extremely clear here, and I want listeners and viewers, please listen to me, because I don't want real martial law and real authoritarian oppression to come out of the inauguration of Joe Biden next week. I want people to understand that Biden and the globalists know they're unpopular. They know their agenda is unpopular. They need to change the subject from all the election anomalies and all the issues and his connections to China and his son and the rest of it to domestic war, domestic violence, and Trump supporters being an outlawed group that they say they want to crush, that they want to destroy, that they want to punish. They said they want to level us after they got rid of Trump. So we're having a big event saying, hey, we want you to hold 10 days of hearings and actually look at the evidence of fraud. That was our goal. That was our motive. The globalists had a huge propaganda victory that they had a Capitol stand down and that Trump supporters got manipulated, a minority of them, into entering the building and acting like thugs. But as you said, they have blown it way out of proportion and called it an act of terror, Pearl Harbor, all of this. But now what they're doing, because I see the chatter and we're looking at it very closely, is through the 8chan and other systems, they're saying, now is the great storm. Trump is invincible. This weekend, you are under orders from Trump, which you're not, folks. Trump's out saying, don't be violent. Don't come to D.C. Don't do this. This isn't who we are. Because he knows that they've got globalist operatives in there deliberately putting out this information to try to get people to storm governors' mansions, to attack capitals, and to be set up. So if you go to these rallies, wear press, point out that you're neutral. That's what I would do, and document what's happening. But This is the time they're going to detonate truck bombs. This is the time they're going to try to do Oklahoma City Part 2 to blame us. They've done it before, and this is their plan. And so I just want to encourage everybody to understand that violence is not the answer, and certainly randomly going out with armed protest where they can set us up and put a mass shooter in to blame the armed protest is not the way to go. We did this last year in Virginia. 50,000 people showed up at the Capitol. We open carried legally and lawfully because they were trying to ban guns. Not one person got hurt. One person got arrested. Now, that scared the globalists. That was peaceful. And if anybody would have said storm the Capitol, they would have been grabbed by the crowd. That was real patriots, okay? What happened in Virginia a year ago in January of 2020. That's what we want. But that was our time, our event, where but this is the globalist hour where they are manipulating in a 3-year program with this Q technology, with real globalist intelligence, putting real stuff in there so people think it's legitimate, to now set people up at this moment that Trump wants this uprising and that everybody's really been saved and that Biden's about to be removed and all this. We are being walked into a trap where they don't just destroy Trump, they discredit and outlaw the populist movement that brought him to power. And so I cannot stress to people enough that they are trying to legitimize martial law, the deep state is, and people need to be very, very, very careful. Paul?
Yeah, I would echo that, Alex. I'm going to move on to social media censorship now in the aftermath of what we've just talked about, because we've seen probably the biggest internet censorship purge ever over the past week or so, of course, culminating in the banning of Donald Trump on Twitter. But a new report today says, Alex, according to the Washington Post, a quote, growing body of evidence shows that Facebook played a much larger role in the Capitol Hill storming than COO Sheryl Sandberg claimed in a Monday interview live streamed by Reuters in what the Post described as deflecting blame. This is out of Zero Hedge. According to the Post, the hashtag Stop the Steal was still widely in use as of Monday, when a search revealed that 128,000 people were talking about it. This is on Facebook, and in many cases using it to coordinate for the rally. So, Alex, surely it's time for Facebook to be deleted from the App Store, right?
That's what we saw with Gab. One guy that went in and shot up that synagogue was a terrible act. He supposedly said, I'm going in to do this 5 minutes before. So that means if somebody mailed a letter through the mail saying they were going to commit a crime and did, the post office is to blame. But then when Facebook had the live streaming of the massacre in New Zealand at the mosque, well, they weren't to blame. Well, yeah, it's like if somebody calls in a bomb threat over a telephone, AT&T isn't to blame. So the idea that Parler had its services taken away and they say may never come back because they've been so blackballed and so shut down, the fact that that's happening based on some people were organizing to go to the Capitol on Parler, this is an impossible yardstick where if anybody ever does anything on your platform, you're to blame. No, that's why we have Section 230. It's a third-party system. You are not responsible for what people do on the platform as long as you follow federal, state law. Now, let's expand on that. Once they deplatform you, they're then able to lie about whatever you say. Trump's been giving these speeches about peace and justice and coming together and not having violence. The media is not putting it out so that when there's violence this weekend, they can say it's Trump's fault. This is very, very dangerous. And if you look at what they've done to Trump, it's beyond deplatforming. It's gulagging. I noticed that the Kentucky Fried Chicken version of Alex Jones, he looks like Colonel Sanders. Glenn Beck was on my favorite TV show, Tucker Carlson, last night, and he was stealing lines from Matt Drudge about how it's an internet ghetto and how we're being put in internet ghettos. And I'm not mad at Glenn Beck. It's just that he just always steals lines, doesn't say where he got them from. That was coined by Matt Drudge like 15 years ago. But they're going to put us in internet ghettos. And that's what these are. So first they deperson you, deplatform you, then they put you in a ghetto, then they physically arrest you. Well, now the left is on Twitter, as you know, millions of tweets just salivating, hundreds of thousands saying, arrest Alex Jones, arrest Roger Stone. People are coming to Roger Stone's house saying, we know you did this. The poor guy was worried about there might be violence, so he didn't even go give a speech on the 6th, and he flew back early and learned that police raided his hotel room at the Willard, where I was also staying, 30 minutes after he left. The guy was watching Fox News in his hotel and eating lunch. Then he had a bad feeling and left. We're like, where's Roger? Because my seat was right next to him. It said Roger Stone, and he was not there. And so my fat ass sat in both chairs. But that's where this has gotten, because Trump gets up and says, we're going to fight. We're not going to let him steal it from us. We're going to peacefully march down there. Again, that's exactly what Trump Jr. said. But regardless, his rhetoric, you could say in this climate, might be taken out of context, maybe dial it back a little. The left is saying, I want you to go to their houses. I want you to go to the grocery stores, the gas stations, the shops, and get in their face. And Black Lives Matter comes and smashes people's dinners and throws glasses down and gets in their eyes and beats people's asses. And the media goes, that's good. And I saw CNN had a guest on saying, you know, this man that shot Scalise was not a terrorist. He was a hero. And Wolf Blitzer nodded his crazy ass head. And so now you've got Biden calling Trump a Nazi. And Goebbels, well, what do? We kill Nazis, I guess, huh? So they're the ones just ratcheting up the rhetoric, turning it up on high. They're at like 11, Spinal Tap 11. And they got us up to about a 5. And they're like, we're going to put you in jail because you turned it up to a 5. And I'm like, dude, you're at 11. You're at 11. And again, it's because they think they can manage this and do this because they've gotten away with all the crazy stuff they've done and burning down the cities and shooting cops in the head and all the rest of this. And it's just crazy authoritarianism, because this is the most important thing I'm going to say today on your show. The globalists have never been held accountable by governments. And I want to explain this. I got another place where I was wrong. And I've been saying this for years now. I'm not just saying this at this point, but I'm 47. I've figured out a few things being in the middle of this so long. The libertarian idea of privatize everything and everything will be open and free and no borders, that's a fundamental lie, because the corporations are just becoming governments with more power and no checks and balances, and are already acting like fascist governments and are modeling everything they do out for communist China or partnering with them. And so we're here watching all this. We need the EU to go after big tech. We need the US to go after it. We need it broken up. We need it stopped. They shouldn't have the power to stop the communications of a president. They shouldn't have the power to stop the communications of whole classes of people with an AI system that says you can't say stop the steal, or you can't debate election fraud, whether you're right or wrong. I mean, hell, the Democrats spent 4 years saying Trump stole the election and it should be overturned. So we've gone over the edge, Paul. We're not going into tyranny. We're in a very fast-moving current. We've fallen into a river of tyranny, and we're going over a waterfall that's even worse. And the waterfall's like 50 yards away. And so this is what all tyrants do. They get a lot of power. They get a lot of control. They make it personal. They believe their own rhetoric against their enemies, and then they want to go to war with their enemies. And so they're starting a war with a giant armed camp, and it's not going to go well. And so the frog is not boiling. The frog has jumped out of the pot, and the boiling water is boiling over right now. And so that's why a lot of my listeners are mad at me. It's a minority of them. Jones, we want General Jones. We want you to lead us in a war to arrest Pelosi and Biden. They've set it up like that so they can trick us into that and then bring in martial law. This is such a dangerous point, because Klaus Schwab can say, the virus isn't really that big a threat. We're just using it to take control of society and shut off carbon and hurt populous nations. And they admit they've got us under siege. They admit their main investments are in China. So by having us closed and China open, that makes their investments go up. This is economic war. Big tech and the banks have doubled their profits. And this is all naked. And so here's the most important point, Paul. I'm begging the average leftist to understand something. You've been manipulated. I've been manipulated. We've all been manipulated into fighting each other and into hating each other. You're not going to get ahead working for the New World Order. The globalists don't care about you. You're not part of the power structure. And every right you give up that you think is part of your collective power is actually you being set up and dehumanized. And it's come out in Facebook. Big tech says we want our users alone and depressed and under our control. And they've radicalized you. And they put Trump in. I believe he won the election 4 years ago, but they put him in to be a lightning rod to energize the left to become authoritarian. And I realized I fell into the trap of defending Trump sometimes no matter what, because it's that primitive dialectic of two sides. But this is a lot bigger than Trump, a lot bigger than you or I. It's about the whole world. And we need to talk about the Great Reset. We need to talk about the New World Order. We need to talk about the globalists and their post-human plan, Paul.
Exactly, Alex. And I want to get on to more of that longer-term agenda in the closing question. First, though, Jack Dorsey came out with this statement. And by the way, it's a fact that the Black Lives Matter riots over the past 7 months caused at least 25 deaths. That's the lowest figure. $2 billion in property damage. We're now being lectured by the same people who advocated for or facilitated that. You know, Kamala Harris was on Colbert back in June. She said, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. They're not going to let up. They should not. And we should not. $2 billion in property damage, 25 deaths. You know, David Dorn, the police captain, shot in the head. That happened over the past 7 months. It happened before Trump was elected, by the way. We had several mass shootings committed by people radicalized by BLM rhetoric. If QAnon Trump supporters had a protest and a mass shooting of 6 police officers had happened, of course the media would blame Trump supporters. But we have this massive censorship. We have the Black Lives Matter Antifa riots being almost exclusively organized on Facebook and Twitter. Nothing happens to them. They're immune under Section 230. Those riots were not organized on Gab, Parler. Gab's under attack. Parler's disappeared for now. Now they're going after Telegram because that got 25 million new users. But then we have this statement from Twitter founder Jack Dorsey, which came out last night, in which he admitted that banning Trump, quote, sets a precedent I feel is dangerous. The power an individual or corporation has over a part of the global public conversation. He said, quote, over the long term, it will be destructive to the noble purpose and ideals of the open internet. So he admits, Alex, taking decisions as the owner, the founder of the company, that are dangerous and destructive to noble causes. Yet these actions are celebrated by the left and the media. Will the real Jack Dorsey please stand up? Alex, who is running Twitter at this point?
Well, I know exactly what Jack Dorsey is doing, and I'm going to leave it at that. Let's just say I talk to people that talk to him on a routine basis. And Dorsey claims behind the scenes, funny you asked that, and I'm going to leave it at that. But I mean, household names have told me that. When I say names, I mean names. 2 household names have told me that Jack Dorsey tells them Alex Jones is always right. There's a quote, Alex Jones is always right, and that I'm like his guru, okay? And then I was told this by a major Hollywood guy that is like a guru, that they all think I'm their guru. Okay, now, I'm not trying to brag, Paul. I've never told that story. What Twilight Zone world is that? Why the hell are these people saying I'm their guru, and then he banned me? And see, I didn't believe it when he kept me on and said he was going to fight for me, and then I went and, yelled at Rubio and the CNN guy that took me off. I don't know what the hell's going on. All I know is this. Uganda says we're shutting off social media ahead of our election because we saw the riots in the U.S. I'm not agreeing with that, but, they just shut it down completely, okay, so that riots couldn't be organized. Then they put a statement out saying this is dangerous. This is, you ought to read it. It's comical. I'm sure you've seen it, Paul. Maybe somebody can, on your side can pull it up, but it's like, when this is critical to democracy and it's dangerous to ever involved in an election by censoring anybody, and we stand against this, and this could never happen. Oh, yeah, there it is. Let me see if I can read that. Ahead of the Ugandan election, we're hearing reports that internet service providers are being ordered to block social media and messaging apps. We strongly condemn internet shutdowns. They are hugely harmful, violate basic human rights, and the principles of the hashtag open internet. Earlier this week, in close consultation with our peers, we suspended a number of accounts. It goes on from there, targeting the election in Uganda. So then they have another thing about how they're targeting the election, manipulating it, but it should be free and open. I mean, all of this is complete and total doublespeak, Paul.
And we've also had this conversation once again over the past week. And by the way, one thing I wanted to mention was Poland. because we've had no solutions to this internet censorship. Trump was in control of both houses in his first term. He did absolutely nothing. The Republican Congress members who did nothing, by the way, are all funded, bankrolled by big tech. That's one of the biggest lobbying groups there. That's why they'd said nothing and did nothing. We have a law in Poland right now about to pass, it looks like it, where social media companies would be fined $2.2 million a pop for censoring lawful free speech. So if they censor somebody, if they ban somebody, they've got 24 hours to reconsider it. Then after 48 hours, the individual, the user, can file a petition in court for return of access, and then the court will consider it over the next 7 days.
And that's exactly what we need here, but Congress won't stand up.
Yeah, they've done nothing whatsoever, even when they had control. The other aspect of it is we're told deplatforming works. They've been saying that for the past 3 solid years of hardcore censorship. We're told it's crucial to stop radicalization, polarization, and violence. Yet after 3 years, Alex, of hardcore censorship and deplatforming, radicalization and polarization is worse than ever. I mean, can the argument be made that censorship, and many people have cited studies in making this argument, that banning people, censoring people drives them underground, it makes them more irate, more angry, and it makes it more difficult to actually track what they're saying. Censorship actually worsens extremism and radicalization.
Well, absolutely, and I appreciate how much time you give me. I can keep going a few more minutes if you want or longer, Paul, because I don't ever really get a chance out there in the wider world other than Infowars.com to actually tell people what I'm really doing, what I really stand for. But what you just said is one of the few things I actually wrote down here on my list I wanted to get to. I want the Q people to know that I'm not saying you're bad as a person, because if I'm mean to you and I try to discredit you, you're going to feel like that you're a good person, so Q must be good. Stop associating your identity with Q and understand that that's how the psychology works. It says a lot of stuff that's true, but then adds lies to it and then gets you to pledge allegiance to it and say that it's your identity, so that when you hear Q being attacked, you feel like you're being attacked. So I want to explain something. What Paul just said is beyond critical. It's absolutely essential. They use these underground groups, and by driving people off the main internet, off of Facebook, off of Twitter, off of YouTube, it drives them into these internet ghettos where you've got corporations and think tanks and the FBI, and the Southern Poverty Law Center is one of the biggest provocateur groups on record. And they go in with psychologists posing just like a pervert poses to pick up your 12-year-old daughter and knows how to act like he's a 12-year-old boy. And they manipulate people. And so Q is always talking about how he's this super military intelligence person. Okay, and everybody fetishizes, like, oh, it doesn't matter, Trump's leaving. That's part of the Q plan now. They can never admit they've been conned. So I want to explain to all the Q people something. The only thing that's secret is advanced technology, life-extension technology, and quantum computing and things like that. And that's the breakaway civilization. That's the technocracy. They keep the army and they keep intelligence groups in governments on very short leashes. They're some of the most compartmentalized people out there. But just so you want to know, for everybody, we knew from the Capitol Police and we knew from our sources inside Army Special Operations and a lot of other places that did have access to who the groups are and what went on at the Capitol. Okay, I know the groups. There's no point in calling the FBI and telling them because they sent them there, okay? But I just wish if I'd have been there in the early morning when Antifa first started the fights and everything, and if I'd have recognized the people, and I did recognize some of them, makes me want to cry, that I would have physically, my security guys are badasses, and a bunch of them are DC cops and you name it, and real special operations people, Delta Force, you name it. I would have gone in there and stopped them. And you talk about hindsight, it's not a guilt feeling, Paul. It's that, man, it's that one that got away, man. It's like, oh, how did I just but I figured if Trump's saying lead the march, he must know what's going on. And so if anything Trump did wrong is he had too much optimism in his crowd. He was too focused on the election fraud going on. And what was Trump thinking when because I remember he kept going, is that hundreds of thousands? Is that 1 million out there? Because it was just oceans of people. And so Trump really thought 50,000 would show up. So part of Trump being isolated, only having like 4 loyalists left back then, that was week ago, is that Trump is isolated. It's very dangerous right now. And so I watched the 45th president of the United States walk right into a trap with me. Okay? And I thought maybe I was set up. Maybe the Secret Service lied to me and Trump didn't want me to lead it. No, I confirmed Trump wanted me to lead it. The Secret Service was smiling at me and liked me. They gave us stuff on Hillary. They're good people. So the leader of the free world is isolated. He fought the globalists. He's surrounded. The last thing he wanted was violence and a bunch of very low IQ Q people. And I'm not saying there aren't smart Q people. I know a lot of engineers and people that are into it because it's a fun little factoid game for them. But the type of folks that showed up and LARPed into that building, the Q people weren't violent. They were the ones that wanted the selfies and everything. But I'm ranting here, Paul. It's just that, yes, it's going to come out. And the media also cherry picks. They go, well, Jones said it was Antifa, but now he says it's Q. And now he says it was some Trump supporters. Which is it? That's how they play this game. I said all what I saw. It's all those groups. It was mob psychology. I'm being completely honest. And again, I underestimated how pissed off Trump supporters are and how the fuse is lit. And I want to warn the FBI, not in a threatening way. You've got families too. We don't want the dollar to go under. I know most of you aren't bad men and women. It's the weirdos on top that are all involved in this spook, spy activity. America is ready to explode. And if you provocateur events and then try gun confiscation, which I know Biden and the Chi-Coms want, the country's going to disintegrate, which is what China wants. They're on record saying in Politburo videos they put out 10 years ago they would foment a civil war here. And to some degree, maybe I played into that. None of us are perfect. But damn it, now I can see this clearer than day. Do not let patsies detonate a truck bomb just so you can deal with the threat of the American right. You're going to trigger all-out war. Do not do it. And that's all I'm saying here is, and some of my listeners are like, Jones, you just want to continue with your life and your wife and your kids and going out to eat and stuff. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. I don't want a civil war. You're like, well, we'll win it. It's time to get it going on. Have you been in this 27 years? Have you been arrested? Have you been demonized? Have you been sued 50 times? Have you been lied about? Did you have family that worked for the CIA and got set up in Latin America? No, you didn't. You don't know what you're talking about. And so that's all I'm telling people is this is not a frickin' game, man. Ask the military guys with the zip ties running around like idiots in the House and Senate under orders from the president to arrest people. No, the president doesn't want you to do that. You set us up, dumbasses. You walked right into their trap 50 times worse than I did. So stop it. Stop it, everybody. Holy crap. You got Swallowswell ran the impeachment of the president. A Chinese agent, a couple days ago, ran the impeachment of the 45th president for the second time. A Chinese agent on record. Paul, I'm ranting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's all right, Alex. I'm gonna bring it back to Trump because we've done over an hour now, I think. But I wanna finish it on Trump because he is in his final hours now. It looks like as president. He once famously tweeted not so long ago. He just was trying to stop the world from killing itself. Now they're going after him. They've taken his bank accounts. Organizations are severing ties with the Trump organization itself. Of course, he faces a second impeachment once again. As a victim of this process, a very similar process, what advice would you give Trump? What do you think is going to happen to him after the end of this month? And what will the legacy of Donald J. Trump eventually be?
Well, I think the legacy should be stop listening to Jared Kushner. Because at every step, Jared Kushner has set Trump up. And, to him, that means he's smarter than Trump, means he's more powerful than Trump. It's a Machiavellian mental illness. And I don't want to just demonize Kushner for no reason. It's taken me years to be sure that he's definitely a bad actor. And, I mean, hell, when you pay twice the value for a building just because it's at 666 Park Avenue, you got something wrong with you. And that's not a joke, folks. So the Omen baby is always there sabotaging Trump. Trump needs to be giving long speeches every day. He needs to be out in the public. He needs to get with investors right now and launch his own bank for patriots that have been not given service. He needs to launch his own internet service. He needs to not worry about launching a new Newsmax or a new InfoWars, a TV show. That would come secondarily. He threw a big website, Freedom World, Genesis 2, whatever you want to call it, needs to have our own banking, our own insurance, our own internet service. That's what they fear, Just like we built a new Atlantis. My ancestors came here to build the new republic. They were thrown out of power in England. They came, they set up the United States of America. And so it's the same thing over and over again. The original English were overtaken by the Norman, took them hundreds and hundreds of years, but they finally set up a new country. Okay? So it's the same thing. We must accelerate that. Trump needs to set up immediately his own systems and announce the new grand plan. The idea of it is key. He'll get caught in the minutia and who's the best company and what's the best deal. And no, announce it, build it and they will come. Announce that Leif Erikson found the new world and that Columbus confirmed it and we're going to go colonize it. You know, it's the adventure of it. That's the adventure of InfoWars, the adventure of Summit that you did, Paul, that we're so proud of. And that's what this is about. See, people always think, like I had Matt Bracken on last week, and he's like, I just love this Epic Times reporter, and he said the guy's name. And I know who he is, too. I forget his name, but he's really smart, good-looking, on his feet, a patriot, but 2.0, and that it's not even political. You know, smarter than I am in hindsight. And Bracken goes, I'm sorry to plug another show. Dude, are you kidding, man? I love it that Paul's off kicking ass at Summit News. I love Epic Times. I love Tucker Carlson. I mean, you know, I'm not gay, but if I was, you know, I mean, for Tucker Carlson, I mean, I love seeing all these good people out there. That's what I want is a culture and a system of freedom. I'm not in competition like a Limbaugh. Michael Savage likes me because I can talk to him and get him out of his competitiveness. But it's like there will be blood with Michael Savage. I'm going to be number one. I'm dominant. I'm in charge. I'm the best talk show host. I had the best ratings. And I'm not putting Savage down. It's just that I literally don't want to be number one. I want to be obsolete. I've got ranches and everything. I love to oil paint. I used to run 6 miles every day. I'm a big fat ass. I work all the time. I don't want to do this. I don't want to fight the FBI. I don't want to fight the left. I don't want to hurt America. I don't want to hurt the Chinese. I want globalism to stop. I want the anti-human agenda to stop. And yes, I'm not stupid. I knew when they spent 2 years saying I was Satan on earth in 2016 and 2017 into 18, that I was not that important. They were picking me as a populist that they hated, that if they could get people to accept banning me, that they would accept banning anybody. And now it's the president. And a lot of folks are like, well, screw him. I'm sick of it all being Trump, Trump, Trump. You know, Carlson's one area he's wrong is he's like, you know, his expiration date's up. Well, no, Biden's is. I mean, beyond that. But if we just abandon Trump, he'll go away, this will stop. No. They're going to shut Trump down and use him as an image, a fake image, a cartoon image that, you know, hates the Mexicans and hates the whatevers that isn't him, to always get people to get energized and attack us. He's the Emmanuel Goldstein of 1984 now, in the 5 minutes or 10 minutes of hate. And so whether we like it or not now, we can't abandon Trump. We can criticize him, say where he was wrong. But if we let him be banned, if we don't phoenix him, like people phoenixed InfoWars, our listeners got it, and I salute them, then they'll be able to get anybody. And that's why the Mexican president and even Merkel and even the French president, see, that's why the founders created separation of powers. They knew you'd get a dictator unless you had the groups fighting over power, then they'd never get centralization. And so even the little French, you know, demigod, sex toy tyrant, even he is saying this is outrageous because now we've got government who didn't care about our freedoms, didn't care about the common rabble. But now they're understanding that when you, as one goes, we all go, that when you let little people be shut down and then big people be shut down, well, then kings are being shut down because that's who they're really shooting for. And so we knew that's where this was going, Paul. And so I take no pleasure in the fact that Trump didn't do the right thing. He tried to. He gave the orders and Kushner sabotaged it. He's the one that allowed this all to happen. Jared Kushner.
And obviously Kushner was the one who told Trump not to join any alternative media platforms to, again, silence his voice after Twitter banned him. You know,
and he did it 2 years ago. And he did it. He told him when Trump could have moved and built his own thing or and had multiple legs, he said, no, sir, stand on one leg. Who tells you to stand on one leg?
Yeah, should have joined Paula 2 years ago, and then he would have migrated even greater numbers of people over, including lawmakers, and it would have been more immune from being shut down.
But just one other point I'd like to make here in the time we have. You were asking what it's like to be deplatformed and how that connects to Trump. The most frustrating thing is they can say things about you and say lies about you, and then you can't even respond to it. That's really the most frustrating thing. And one of the big ones is everywhere they say, Jones says he's an actor, Jones says he's fake. And if anything, I'm the opposite. And they play these mental games that, well, he's in Waking Light, he was in Scanner Darkly, he was in some other movies, so he must be an actor all the time. No, I basically played myself in those movies. Now, that all started, just on the record, when I had a custody battle 4 years ago, I guess 3 years ago. And in the depositions and lead up, my ex-wife was putting in exhibits of me with clown makeup on, acting crazy as the Joker, saying, I want kids to take vaccines, I want kids to take psychotropics, I want you to die. Well, I don't believe that. I was playing the part of the Joker. And so my lawyer argued, well, when Jack Nicholson plays the Joker, you don't think he's actually the Joker in real life. So that's the type of manipulation that goes on. Is they will parse hairs, they will split hairs and go, well, he admits sometimes he doesn't mean what he says. Well, when I dress up like a green gay frog with a pink tutu, it's a joke. But when I'm on air telling people I regret that things got out of control at the Capitol and I try to stop it, I'm trying to be legitimate with people. And so much in the left-right fight that's gone on, and I've been part of this, I'm guilty as well, we just go with whatever we think wins the argument sometimes. And so I've always tried to be honest, and I've always tried to reach out to people, but sometimes I get lazy, I get tired, I get grumpy, and I say things in hindsight that I think hurt the human cause of freedom. And so that's really just my message here to the left and everybody else is, I remember when the liberals were pro-free speech and anti-war. Just because Trump was anti-war, you became pro-war. That's sick. If you wanted to criticize Trump for real issues, that's fine, but to criticize him just because you get rewarded with being promoted on Twitter and Facebook, that's Pavlovian conditioning. That's reward, punishment, psychology, and you're giving up your will when you do that. So I am not an actor, and I believe what I say, and I stand for what I believe in, and I've proven very accurate about the world and globalism and how predatory it is because I'm reading their own documents. And that's why I just want to encourage the right wing, the left wing, libertarians, everybody, to really be honest about this. You know, the Heritage Foundation says, like I said earlier, anything private's good. Acting as government is good. We need checks and balances, and that's all I'm saying. And the globalists have decided to take us into a dystopia. It's much easier to manage a dystopia than to manage a renaissance. And I want a new renaissance, Paul, and I just want a good future for all of us into the years and millennia to come. And it's been great knowing you, and it's great to see you break off on your own. And I just want to encourage all your listeners out there to remember that humanity is good. Humanity has a great destiny, and we should rediscover the fundamentals that made humanity great and reject the things that humanity knows is destructive and bad.
Okay, Alex, we'll leave it there. And anyone who has met Alex Jones can vouch for one thing, and that is what you see is what you get. Alex, really appreciate the time. Thanks again.
Thanks, Paul.